Hello, we're just going to wait a minute or so to give everybody a chance to join. Good day. Welcome to our webinar on insurance for climate risks in Southeast Asia and the Pacific. My name is Paul Faith, and I'm the Global Technical Director for Climate and Energy at Apt Associates. I will be hosting our session today. As most of you likely know, people have a tendency to talk about insurance as something of a silver bullet to support climate adaptation and address loss and damage. In practice, however, insurance is just one tool in the toolbox, and both the public and private sectors have encountered challenges in scaling climate risk insurance. One thing we do know is that contextualization is key. Insurance products, whether public or private, need to be tailored to meet the specific needs of those impacted by climate change around the world. In today's webinar, we will be discussing these issues. If you have any comments as we go along, please post them in the chat. I'll be monitoring those, and we hope to have some time to take a couple of questions at the end. If you think of a question after the webinar is over, you can post those to my LinkedIn profile. And just to check the spelling, my name is Paul Faith, F like in Frank, A-E-T-H. That's the only one that will come up if you look. You can post them to my LinkedIn profile, and we'll get answers to the panel and post them back out. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to today's moderator, Ambassador Ulay Uludang. Ulay was the lead negotiator for small island states, as well as the former ambassador of Palau to the UN. She has also served as Palau's ambassador to the EU, Palau's permanent representative to the FAO, and is currently the region's climate advisors. In these roles, she has been highly involved in past COP negotiations, and Ulay is currently on her way to COP in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, right now. Ulay, thank you very much for joining. We are thrilled to have you with us today. I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Paul. Good morning from Palau. On my way to the COP, but a pleasure for me to be here this morning and to moderate this webinar on insurance for climate risk in Southeast Asia and the Pacific. Insurance has the potential to upset how we are thinking about climate adaptation in the region and globally. So I'm very excited that we're here and we're going to have this conversation, especially on the eve of COP27, where a lot of the focus is really on climate finance. Our panel today includes Jennifer Cisse, the Director of Climate Adaptation and Resilience from Apt Associates, Angelo Kairos de la Cruz, Deputy Executive Director for the Institute for Climate and Sustainable Cities, and Akata Taito, Inclusive Insurance Solution Hub Coordinator for the UNCDF Pacific Insurance and Climate Adaptation Program. Sadly, Catherine Stalberg from USAID was not able to join us today. And however, while We love to have a lot of introductions. I'm sure everyone can look and find all our backgrounds on social media platforms like LinkedIn if you would like to know more. So this morning, it's a pleasure for me to begin with you, Jen. And to get us started, could you please explain what sovereign risk pools are and how they differ from microinsurance?
Thanks,
Jen?
Olai, and really happy to be here this evening for us here in the US, and this morning for those of you joining from Southeast Asia and the Pacific. So sovereign risk pools are one type of insurance that is offered to help governments manage climate risk. So we have currently, I think, 4 risk pools around the world. There's an Africa risk pool, there's a Caribbean risk pool, there's a Pacific risk pool, and there's actually kind of a newly being developed Southeast Asia risk pool. And these pools offer parametric or index-based insurance solutions to protect against extreme weather primarily. And so they can help governments with quick liquidity after an extreme weather event. On the other hand, microinsurance is insurance that is offered to, usually purchased by individuals. They could be people or businesses, and that's to protect themselves, just like you would buy car insurance or you might have health insurance. You can purchase a microinsurance product to protect yourself against extreme weather as well. So I think that a lot of the conversation we're going to be having today is about the microinsurance side, but just to understand that that's just one tool and there are other types of insurance solutions to help manage climate risk.
Thank you, Jen. And now I'd like to give it over to Kairos. Kairos, the Institute of Climate and Sustainable Cities, ICSC, has been involved in partnerships related to climate and disaster risk finance and insurance. How has insurance been considered for managing climate risk in the Philippines? And I understand that you're having a lot of typhoons coming your way. So this is an important question for you to be able to address. Thank you.
We are now on our, I think, 15th or 16th typhoon of the year, and we're expecting another one as the first one is just going out of the Philippine area of responsibility. So this is a very timely issue, and I'm really glad to be here. Insurance, in terms of its implementation in the Philippines, I mean, we would like to think that a vulnerable country such as the Philippines would already have a good grasp of what insurance is and what it can do for us. Unfortunately, I think in terms of implementation, we still have a lot of aspects that can be found wanting, and would need further push to actually make it work. We do have a policy framework around insurance. We have the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Law, which was passed, I think, in 2012. We have risk transfer mechanisms, insurance as part of that policy. However, in terms of implementation, we are still limited to sector-specific insurance, particularly agriculture and fisheries. We're still trying to grasp, the concept of more innovative products such as parametric insurance. That's why we're still limited to pilot testings, but we're seeing some good results. I don't want to be the cynic, despite the negative impacts that we're getting, because I think we are moving forward. It's just that we can move forward faster. And I think this one, continuous discussions such as the one that we're having now would have a positive impact to those type of discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kairos. And as in many countries, the needs of the urban residents in the Philippines differ from those living in the rural areas. What specific needs are to be considered if you want to tailor insurance to meet the needs of urban versus the rural residents?
From the get-go, I think we have this misconception that if you're living in the urban areas here in the Philippines, and we have more than 1,000 local government units, that there's this misconception that if you're living in a city, you're less vulnerable to climate impacts because you're living in a condominium or in a fancy house and so on. But I think the learnings and experience for the past years would only show that cities usually are also caught flat-footed every time there's a disaster that's happening. Every time the disaster happens, simply because people assume that they're doing okay, so they wouldn't move out in rivers, in creeks, and stuff like that. So I think the first step that we should do is to have a proper assessment of what's actually at risk. Right now, um, local governments outside Metro Manila are spending more time and resources to come up with their climate and disaster risk assessments or CDRAs. And it's very easy to find out that some of the major cities in the Philippines don't even bother to come up with their climate and disaster risk assessments because it's not high on the agenda. They're doing something else. And it's causing a problem because right now we only have assessments for agriculture, fisheries, agriculture and fisheries in terms of climate impacts, in terms of losses. I think agriculture and fisheries sums up to something like three billion US dollars every year in terms of losses due to extreme weather events. But no one knows in terms of urban assets how much is actually at risk. So it's very hard for insurance companies. It's very hard for local governments to actually start talking about insurance because they don't know what are at risk. So I think that the first step that we should do is to come up with a proper evaluation. And I think it's gonna be different. It's gonna be interesting, rural and urban settings, but both are crucial and important for the Philippines. So having an assessment would be crucial to that.
So right now the assessments are really strictly sectoral based, I assume, because you're saying it's focused now on agriculture that are vulnerable sectors. So that's understood. And yeah, the difference between the urban and rural is that you're right. I mean, you live in Makati City, you have the high rises, but the rural areas are where the most vulnerable communities are. So having said that, what role has civil society played in terms of managing risk, especially for the vulnerable Filipinos especially like the rural areas?
I mean, ICIC, my organization, has the privilege of working with various organizations under the Multi-Actor Partnership Project. It's the shorthand name for a very long project. It is called Multi-Actor Partnerships on Climate and Disaster Risk Finance and Insurance. And I think civil society's role in the whole discussion is basically to link up partners, to provide more opportunities for discussions. And I think we're seeing this throughout the implementation of the MAP. For example, here in the Philippines, we've just closed out the MAP project. And I think it's one of the very few moments, if not the first time, that you can have government that you can have government people that you can have government people, you can have civil society, you have academe, you have private sector at the same table talking about, how can we actually make parametric insurance work in a sustainable manner? Or how can we expand indemnity insurance beyond agriculture and fisheries? Because there are other emerging industries that are not covered by law, but are actually also vulnerable to climate extremes and slow onset events. So that the space being carved out by civil society, I think, is actually going to be crucial in pushing the paper forward on insurance. And as I've said, we're happy that we're able to take part in this. The project is coming up with a second phase, which I think is more interesting because it's gonna talk about actual insurance products, actual designing processes, and so on. And I think the role would still be the same. Civil society should provide that space. Civil society would provide the bridge and connection across these various sectors.
Thank you very much, Kairos, for giving us your take on the Philippine um, uh, situation when it comes to climate risk, and really, our condolences and prayers to the people of Philippines, as these sort of monsoon season always brings big typhoon. And although the typhoon starts at our area, I can see when it comes to the Philippines how vulnerable the Filipinos are, and the need for insurance in place to help the people. Now I will move across to the Pacific. Thank you for the Asia response. And now for the Pacific, we have here Akata. And Akata works for the United Nations Capital Development Fund, which looks at Pacific insurance and climate adaptation programs, and also has the portfolio to look on the project, also known as PICAP, and how using insurance to help Pacific Islands and residents manage their own climate risk. So this is interesting because I'm from the Pacific, and I know we just had a freak storm 2 days ago, and in Palau we don't have insurance in place to accommodate when these sort of extreme events occur. So it's a pleasure for me to call on you, Akata, to give us your side on how insurance helps the Pacific with climate risk. Thank you.
Yo, Lion, thank you for having me as part of this important conversation. And yes, indeed, in the Pacific, we all know the development. When we look at the lack of financial tools available for Pacific Islanders to cope with climate events, let alone affordable products. And when we talk about insurance, it's a relatively market that is, the uptake is very low in the Pacific, awareness is very low. And so this is an important space for UNCDF, where we, as a catalyst in the market, we've come in to bring in different players through a unique business aggregator model, meaning that we bring in cooperatives and farmer associations where they are able to bring in a pool of customers, linking them through fintech and mobile money operators to reduce administrative costs. And when we're looking at the overall parametric product itself, the modeling was based on historical data events for the last 43 years in Fiji and Vanuatu. We piloted the parametric product in Fiji in 2000. And this year completed the pilot phase. We made enhancements to the initial product, where we've included rainfall perils. And the enhancements that we had made to the initial product was based on feedback that we had received during the pilot phase from the users themselves. We had engaged independent assessors to go out into the field, talk to the end users, talk to the aggregator associations that we had engaged for this overall delivery model. And based on that feedback, then we made enhancements to the product. And whilst we're talking about parametric product, when we launched it in Fiji, the cost that we were looking at is around 10% of the premium cost, meaning if you take a cover of, say, $500 US, the premium cost that you pay is around $50 US. And in the Fijian context, this is less than 2 Fijian dollars a week. So when we go out into vulnerable communities, we tell them, if you're able to sacrifice, say, a can of Coke or fuel cigarette, which is quite common product used in the rural areas, you would be able to afford premium and thereby have quick access to cash when you most need it. Before parametric insurance was rolled out in the Fijian market or in Vanuatu, there were no climate risk financial tools available. 2 years now, and we've seen the uptake increase to now 4,000 households being covered and having a financial product in place for recovery measures and to build resilience.
Thank you, Akata. UNCDF is known for your commitment to scaling up digital solutions. How do you engage with the private sector when working on digital solutions to increase access to insurance?
Thank you. So in our overall product design, we, right from the start, engaged a fintech firm to develop an iOnboard platform for customer registration and onboarding to the parametric microinsurance product. What we have found is that in turn, the iOnboard platform have assisted a lot of the cooperatives and farmer association partners as they do not have or keep proper recording of their members. So in hindsight, the platform sort of acted as a database for these aggregator partners. We also engaged the mobile network operators so that the premium payout from the cooperative to the insurance company and through to the process of payouts in the event that there's a cyclone and a trigger event. This is all done through the mobile wallet. And the reason why we promoted the use of mobile wallets in Fiji is because in the last year alone, we've seen 88% of the adult population actively using mobile money. And the ecosystem for the mobile wallet is working well in that we've seen people, even in the rural areas and women, comfortably using their mobile wallet regularly to pay for goods and services. They're also using that as a savings platform. We often see that after a disaster, it is the mobile network infrastructure that is the first to be restored. So this reassures us that in the event that there's a cyclone or a trigger event, the payments will reach vulnerable communities quickly. So yes, mobile wallets allows for not only increasing access and reach to most vulnerable groups in the rural areas, but that at the same time allows beneficiaries to receive or have quick access to cash after a disaster. And for the private sector, on the other hand, this overall reduces their administrative costs.
Thank you, Agatha. And is this just for Fiji, for the digital solution space for now, or is it both Fiji and Vanuatu?
For Vanuatu, we could not, when we had just piloted the parametric product based on the learnings from Fiji, but we could not right away dive into the digital platform because their country context is different. The way we approach parametric insurance in the Pacific is that we have to conduct demand studies, understand the country context. So for Vanuatu, we noted that bringing in digital platform is only going to complicate the pilot product. So we've started off with a simple, underwriters going out into the field, collecting data through an Excel and coming back to the office and onboarding clients. We feel that in terms of the digital platform, they are not ready yet.
So basically for the Pacific, it's really just Fiji that has implemented that digital platform, right? Correct?
We have a team that's currently on their way to Tonga to pilot the product. And for Tonga, they will be using a similar digital platform because again, the context is different. We are going through an aggregator partner that have the resources, the capacity available, the infrastructure in place to use the digital platform for onboarding of clients. So in Tonga and Fiji, we have that in place. For Vanuatu, we couldn't go through the digital platform right away.
Thank you. And so having said that, with PICAP's approach to scaling up, so I assume then now will be Tonga. And is there any move towards the wider region of the Pacific, including the 14 other PCIDS member countries? In terms of geography?
Certainly, we have other countries also. We have other countries that's in our plan for expansion from south to north. So next year, we are looking at starting off our demand studies in Kiribati, Solomon Islands, and Samoa. Again, as I had mentioned, it's our approach in the Pacific is not a pull and dump approach. We have to first do a scoping exercise, conduct demand studies, understand what's the local context, what are the perils that they are facing with, and what are their preferences, what works well. And then we come back and through back and forth consultation, design the product so that it is tailored to meet each country's context.
Thank you very much, Agatha, for that and for giving us your perspective on the UNCDF and its work in the Pacific. Now I'd like to move to Jen Cisse, the director from Apt Associates. And Jen, we've discussed a bit about insurance solutions to help governments and individuals manage climate risk. Is there a role for meso insurance here as well?
Yeah, thanks, Olai, for the question. So as I described at the beginning, we have macro or sovereign risk insurance that's meant to meet the needs of governments, sometimes even subnational governments. I know that there was a pool being explored in the Philippines actually to provide payouts to cities. So that's another way that kind of macro type solutions are being explored. And then as we discussed, the micro insurance solutions are really targeted at individuals, but then, what about that middle level? So there has been a lot of kind of theoretical conversations and thinking about different types of meso insurance solutions and how they could be designed, but really there have not been that many that have been implemented in practice. And I think there's a lot of space for innovation around meso insurance solutions. So when we say meso, what are we talking about? Usually there are two types of meso insurance. There are meso products that either aggregate demand or products that aggregate risk. So when we talk about aggregating demand, we often are working with, for example, farmers associations or cooperatives, where maybe you have several individuals with similar livelihoods and similar risk exposure, and they already are working together, but it might be difficult for them as individuals to sign up for an insurance product. So by aggregating the demand of a whole group of farmers together through their association, we can provide a meso insurance solution that could then pay out to that association or to that cooperative. So that's one type of meso insurance. Then there's another type of meso insurance that aggregates risk. So that could be, for example, covering risk takers like microfinance institutions or banks that are providing loans to small businesses. They could be off-takers or input providers, folks that are involved in other parts of the value chain and perhaps are exposed to climate risks through the farmers or other people that they're working with, fishers that they're working with in their supply chains. So by providing an insurance solution against, for example, a cyclone to an MFI who's lending in a region that's exposed to cyclone risk, they'll be willing to maybe make riskier loans because they know that if there's a lot of default, they'll be covered because of that extreme event. So that's one way of kind of opening up the supply of credit by providing an insurance solution that meets that middle tier, that meso level. Yeah, and like I said, I think there's a lot of opportunity for innovation in this space. How can we bring together risk takers, input providers, and make sure that they're bundling insurance solutions along with improved inputs, for example. So lots of space for some great products to be designed.
Thank you, Jen. And I'm heading to the COP now, and of course, everyone knows that Egypt, it's been deemed as the implementation COP, and of course, for the Pacific and the SIDS, we're really pushing for a mechanism that be in place for loss and damage, and especially financing mechanisms that will be able to do just this. So in the context of loss and damage due to climate change, what are the potential concerns about asking people and countries to pay for insurance, especially considering that the premiums are likely to increase as climate risk exacerbates?
Yeah, I think this is a really timely topic and a huge issue. There has been a lot of talk about insurance as a way of addressing loss and damage. But frankly, I think a lot of it's either misplaced or at least doesn't get at the root of some of the real challenges that need to be addressed. So what I mean by this is that when we focus on loss and damage, we are really trying to ensure that emitters and global north countries that have historically contributed to climate change take responsibility, not just for mitigation, not just to support adaptation, but take responsibility for the current and very real impacts that countries, societies, and individuals are facing right now due to climate change. And when we create these really exciting climate insurance solutions, if we're selling them in the market in Palau or in Fiji or in the Philippines, and we're asking people to pay for them out of their own pockets, then it's helpful for those individuals to manage their risk, but it's putting the burden of managing loss and damage on the individuals who aren't responsible for climate change to begin with. So I think we have to be really careful when we talk about insurance as a solution to help manage loss and damage. If we want, that is not to say that insurance cannot be part of the loss and damage conversation, but I think we need to be really clear about who is managing the risk and who is paying for the premiums for the insurance products. Also, as you mentioned, costs are increasing, and because of the fact that the premiums for these products are based on historical data, as we have increasing numbers or severity of events, the costs for climate risk insurance solutions are going to increase. And so those costs are going to need to be increasingly borne by those who are responsible for climate change in the first place. So I think creating systems at the international level to have insurance-like solutions, whether they're actually managed by insurance companies or not, but insurance-like solutions where premiums are paid by emitters could be one way of using insurance as part of a solution for loss and damage more broadly.
So having said that, I mean, you're talking about insurance solutions. When it comes to climate adaptation, and of course, in this lead up to the COP, and we're going to have these discussions once we're in Egypt, is how do you design an insurance that would address climate adaptation? Because as you know, like there's going to be a big push back because there a lot of times the bigger countries or the bigger donors would say that adaptation is too costly, and right now you can't quantify adaptation and you can't quantify climate adaptation. So how do you how in terms of your expertise and what you're dealing with, what sort of insurance solutions can be designed to address this, especially when you talk about the individuals or the vulnerable communities that would have to bear the cost of the premiums?
Yeah, so I think there are two different parts to a response for this. First, there's the issue of how to incentivize climate adaptation through insurance. So in an ideal world, insurance premiums are based on risk. And so if people, individuals, companies, or countries are taking steps, taking actions to reduce their risk, that should reduce their premiums, right? So if we can have insurance linked with campaigns to demonstrate the types of actions that individuals can take to reduce their exposure, to promote adaptation, and we can tie that to savings on insurance premiums, that is one way that we can try to incentivize adaptation. So for example, we know that in where I live, where it gets very cold, you might have homeowners insurance cover water damage in your house due to frozen pipes, right? So a pipe freezes in your house and then it bursts and it floods your house, and that might be covered by your homeowner's insurance. the insurance company doesn't want to have to pay for a burst pipe, so they'll actually send out text messages saying, it's going to be really cold this weekend. You should think about making sure that your pipes aren't going to burst, right? So they're incentivizing people to take actions so that they reduce their risk. That's just through consumer education and awareness raising. There are other examples where, for example, if you have a security system on your home, that'll decrease the amount you have to pay for your insurance because there's less likely to be a break-in and you're going to have your stuff stolen. So this already happens in the insurance industry in the US. Now we need to figure out how can we take these same lessons of incentivizing risk reduction and linking them to insurance solutions for climate risk, which as far as I know, we haven't found a good way of doing that, but I'm sure it's just a matter of time to really come up with innovative solutions to promote climate adaptation through the use of insurance solutions. That's on the one hand. Then there's the question of asking vulnerable individuals to pay premiums, or rather how to meet the needs of vulnerable individuals without asking them to pay premiums. And there's been some really interesting work done, either comparing climate insurance to safety net programs or embedding insurance solutions into safety net programs. So I think there were assessments several years ago from Kenya showing that drought-triggered insurance products could meet the needs of vulnerable populations more efficiently than the traditional safety net program. And there was actually discussion at the time of linking direct payments to individuals so the government could take a sovereign risk insurance. Kenya could buy insurance from the African pool. And then when that insurance payout pays out, they could basically channel that directly to vulnerable individuals, right? Linking sovereign insurance with a micro insurance solution. Also, similarly, PCAP, the work that Akata was talking about in Fiji, is working to include insurance solutions as part of the social welfare program in Fiji. That's a pilot program they're working on. So there are ways that we can, if we understand the needs of marginalized and vulnerable individuals who are safety net recipients, we can include insurance solutions that can help to support them after extreme weather events.
Thank you, Jen. Now, before we go to Paul, one final question for everyone, because we haven't touched it, and it's a good topic to touch. Is we've talked about how government responds with insurance. We've talked about vulnerable communities. Now, in terms of the issue of gender, disability, and the other stakeholders, how do you see, or how should the larger discussion on climate risk address these sort of vulnerable stakeholders? Should how do in the case of Philippines, for example, or Fiji, has there been any thought about incorporating the disability group and the gender in looking at insurance solutions? I was just in Fiji a few weeks ago, and I understand that that's one of the groups is the vulnerable groups that are looking into insurance are the disability group and the gender-based group. So I wanted to sort of pose this question to everyone as to how do you think the insurance solutions could be incorporated within these groups?
Thanks, Eliza. Perhaps I can.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead, Akata.
Okay, so for UNCDF, what we have done with the Pacific Disability Forum is that we provided funding and technical support where they could use that to build their internal capacity and provide awareness around disaster risk management and financial preparedness and resilience for persons living with disabilities. what we have done in our overall product design and delivery model is that by using the digital technology, it's somehow sort of disability friendly, and that say a person in a wheelchair don't have to travel to the nearest bank branch to access the payout, or travel to an insurance agency to make payments for their premiums. But this could basically be done through their mobile wallet. And like I had said, in Fiji, the mobile money uptake is very high, in that almost everyone, all the adult population is using mobile wallets. And so this overall delivery design was done taking into consideration persons with disabilities, those that are living right in the rural areas. We know also that women use mobile money more than men in Fiji. And so these aspects were all included in the overall product design. Now, with social welfare recipients, as Jan had sort of briefly highlighted, what we have done is that when we first launched the parametric product in Fiji, there were interest from other UN agencies. So World Food Program, for instance, saw opportunity in the parametric product, as this ties in very well with their social protection strategy, things like looking at food security, and managing risks and shocks for vulnerable communities. And so they came on board to partner with us and subsidize premium for the pilot phase of parametric insurance or social protection insurance product, specifically designed for social welfare. And the product design itself was based on our experience from the previous year. Cyclone Harold was a category 4 when it was crossing Fiji, and by the time it reached Tonga, it was category 5. Now, based on that experience, we noted that it took almost 4 months for government to make a cash payout to social welfare, because networks were down, their government systems were not functioning quite well. And based on that overall experience, we said, okay, we're going to design a product that has a cover of up to $400 with a lower tier premium cost. And then this would be subsidized by the World Food Program. And yeah, so those things were taken into consideration. So it's not just one product addressing everyone, but products can be tailored to meet certain segments in the community, like what we have done in Fiji.
Thank you, Akata. Now I'd like to give it over to Kairos. Do you have any comments? Give us your take from the Philippines on incorporating insurance to vulnerable groups such as the disability group and gender-based groups.
First of all, thank you, Akata, for taking the floor. It gave me a few minutes to think about my answer. In general, I think what we're doing so far, first, we don't have any direct links between people with disabilities, health, and directly to insurance. And that's where, as I've said, that the role of civil society would be to make the connections. So what we're trying to do is right at the onset of doing the adaptation planning of some of the local governments that we work with, is we try to expand the socio-economic framework that we use in the impact chain analysis during the assessments. And that already includes, health, gender, people with disabilities as part of the socioeconomic box, if you can put it that way, in terms of the impact chain analysis. And we say this because, we feel like, taking a sectoral approach, a sector-specific approach on this will only make it unsustainable later on. And we realized that from some of the really good proposals that we got, for example, in the People's Survival Fund, it's the National Adaptation Fund here in the Philippines, wherein local government units are actually able to link health and adaptation by saying that, since we're a small island, saltwater intrusion is already causing health problems to us. Therefore, our adaptation initiatives, whether it's in the form of insurance, whether it's in the form of more infrastructure, it's not only increasing our adaptation points, but it's also making us healthier as a population. And I think it's the same thing. We should be taking the same steps towards inclusion of PWDs, inclusion of gender issues, health, including reproductive health, and so on. When it comes to insurance, because at the end of the day, we feel like a holistic approach on this will not only make it more viable, it will also make it more sustainable, for more actors to come in and actually support. So yeah, we don't have specific products yet, but what we do have is the preparatory stages are being set to include these various sectors. Thanks.
Yeah, and just to add on briefly to what Akata and Kairos have said, I think that, the insurance industry comes out of a kind of old-fashioned financial industry. You can imagine a lot of the firms are Switzerland or Germany based, and they come with this perspective that we're offering an evidence-based product to everybody. So, men can buy it, women can buy it, anybody can buy it. And I think it's taken a while for the lessons that CSOs and the UN have learned working with communities to kind of translate to the financial service providers to say, if you're offering a product and you're only offering one climate risk product and that product meets the needs of a traditionally male livelihood, then you're not offering a product that a woman is going to buy to manage her climate risk, or is not going to meet the needs of somebody with disabilities, or somebody who can't afford the product. So I think really learning how the UN and civil society organizations have been approaching various groups and the intersections between those groups is something that we've started to work on in the insurance sector, but it hasn't made it all the way there. And a lot more work needs to be done in the design of products to make sure that they're meeting specific segments, as Akata was saying, needs, but also in how we're talking about products, how we're disseminating them, and how, making sure that we're able to reach everybody who could use them and benefit from them.
Thank you, Jen. And it's going to be interesting because a lot of big push from the SIDS and the developing world going into Egypt is really on loss and damage, and finding the right mechanism and the right solutions, especially in terms of how to make the financial aspect of the loss and damage mechanism work. While you have the Green Climate Fund and all the other multilateral funds, this particular fund for loss and damage really needs to look at innovative solutions when it comes to insurance, and also fit for purpose. Because we've just heard that, while the Philippines is a bigger country, when it comes to insurance and risk, it differs based on the communities and the vulnerable groups. When it comes to Fiji, it's different, and of course with the Pacific, with our culture and everything else that comes with our circumstances. When you do have successful small pilot insurance project, it's one that is cognizant of what the circumstances are. So it's basically, when you look at insurance for small islands, it's really fit for purpose, and it's really going to be a big challenge going into the COP to figure out what mechanism will be right in place that the global body can support, but yet also have this small spaces where the islands and smaller countries, developing countries, can be incubators for change, for innovative solutions to addressing climate risk. So thank you everyone for your input to the various questions and your responses. Now and I see Agatha, so I'll give it to Agatha.
I think that was somebody clapping, not a hand.
I thought it was a hand. Well, having said that, thank you so much, everybody. And then I'll give it over to Paul. And I'm sure, Paul, are there any questions coming from the chat and from the audience we have a really great group of experts here from the Asia Pacific, and I'm more than happy to take on any questions, I'm sure. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you. That was a great discussion. There aren't questions in the chat, but I have a whole bunch of them, more than the 10 minutes worth that we have. But a couple of things. One, to start, it seems like a fair amount, and I don't know, Miriam, if you can bring Olai, if can she also be included? I can't see her. Yes, thank you very much. The question I have, it seems like anyway, we've been talking a lot about storms, and with the opening with, the situation of Kairos, in the Philippines, you mentioned, I had no idea. I mean, I follow the news, and I kind of get this impression that, yeah, there's a lot of storms in the Philippines, but the numbers that you were talking about were really incredible. And for everybody, I was kind of wondering, is that primarily what we're talking about really, is typhoons or other vulnerabilities? I'm just thinking, island states also can face drought. So are we talking about wildfire? Are we talking about, floods because of sea level rise or other things? What are the other vulnerabilities that we might be talking about when we're talking about what is it that we're interested in ensuring? Kairos, I'll throw that to you since I don't see any volunteers popping up.
Apart from indemnity insurance, I think one of the things that the Philippines is quite keen on, at least the stakeholders that we work with, is to explore, how to go beyond the successful pilots that we had on parametric insurance. Because the Philippines, apart from, first you heard it correct, we're on our 16th typhoon. I just checked. So we're supposed to get at least 20, around 20 in a year. But as mentioned by Akata and Ambassador Olay, the typhoons now are becoming stronger in an erratic manner. So we're seeing, an increase of, despite the preparations that people are doing, within 12 hours, it becomes stronger. And so on. But apart from that, and the thing about typhoons is you can capture it in a dramatic manner, in just a photo, in just a short video clip. People understand it. But here in the Philippines, what we feel like we're missing the point on slow onset events, such as sea level rise. And I think the same case for the Pacific. The Philippines is getting, I think in some areas, 4 times the global average in terms of sea level rise. And that's something we are keen on working on in some of the areas. How to provide insurance, how to provide risk transfer mechanisms beyond disasters and include slow onset events.
Akata or Lai, Jen, any other thoughts?
Yeah, I was just going to jump on that last comment. So, I mentioned an parametric insurance solution for drought. That's actually the most common type of parametric insurance probably in the world. It's the one that's been used the most in sub-Saharan Africa, and is one of the earliest types of parametric insurance that was created. So drought is something, the main issue with parametric insurance is that you need really good data, and you need data that you can get quickly, and often that means satellite data. So you're kind of constrained to what types of satellite data you can get and what types of things you can learn from those data. And partly because of the geographic focus today, I think we've focused a lot on storms. But the other thing I wanted to mention is that slow onset events are very difficult to insure, right? Because it's one thing to say, over 30 years, you're likely to get one Category 5 storm, so we can average it out and you pay this much for your premium. But if something is becoming inevitable, then the insurance premiums for an inevitability get very, very high, right? So I think once we start talking about slow onset events, it becomes much more difficult to think about traditional insurance products, and there we might have to think about more innovative financial solutions.
Jen, I
Thank you,
think you
Jen.
sort of covered what I wanted to talk about, but just to add on, in the Pacific, different countries, based on the studies that we have conducted, highlighted different exposures, but across all three countries that we have conducted studies in, tropical cyclones is quite common, followed by flooding. But as Jen had mentioned, data in the Pacific is quite a challenge. And so I perhaps would like to stress that, we're not limited by innovations, we are limited by data. And when we talk about parametric insurance, we need to have access to data rather quickly. And when we look at rainfall data, for instance, this information we only receive sort of like months after a flooding event. And flooding as per rainfall measured through rainfall in mm, not so much flooding as per sea level rise or coastal inundation. Those things are some of the aspects that we have to sort of consider in the overall product design. So as much as we want to bring in different perils into the parametric insurance space, it's quite difficult when you don't have access to data so that payouts are done rather quickly and people have access to the funds when they need it the most.
I have another question, one more before we wrap up. Olai, did you want to say something? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I interrupt you.
No, I just wanted to sort of, and it's good that I came after Akata. I think one of the issues that we will be facing in the COP is really, yes, we're going to call for a financial mechanism to implement the loss and damage request, but the issue, again, especially for the Pacific Island countries and for small vulnerable countries, is really the data. The issue of data, it's not just data on climate change, it's data collection overall. Most of the countries are too small. We don't have clearinghouse mechanisms that has this data, and the data are collected differently. So right now, I know for a lot of the small island countries in the Pacific, there's no clearinghouse mechanism to collect data for slow onset or to address the issue on insurance. So, and you're talking about, when you talk about slow onset and climate data, you're talking about 10 to 30 years data, which most countries, and especially like, for example, coming from Palau, we don't keep data, we just started to collect data. So at the most we'll have the 5 years to 10-year data, but not enough to then put it into the insurance category when you talk about financial mechanisms. So I think it's a good discussion that we're having. So I'm really hoping that this sort of discussion really comes out at the COP, is really to look at maybe how do you help countries have the right data, and what right data is that? And there's always the need to have vulnerability assessments, because once you have the vulnerability assessments, it'll be able to help, inform, the mechanisms in place on what sort of assistance and solutions are needed. So I just wanted to sort of stress that, because I know it'll be a big issue when we talk about loss and damage and insurance facilities in Egypt.
So Olai will give you the last word. How optimistic are you about a positive outcome on this at COP?
Well, COPs, these conferences become a space, and it become a space to talk about solutions. So I'm hopeful, for the islands, that's what we always have to have going to these big conferences, is focus on really what's at stake. We're now, for example, Philippines is having its 16th typhoon. Palau just had a few tropical depressions coming in, and it's getting very costly. I know when cyclone hits Fiji, it's their economy. They have a greater population. They're most vulnerable in that sense because of their population and economy. So I am hopeful. You can't give up hope when you're from an island. So I really think that at least progress on there is an appetite for a financial mechanism for loss and damage. How that's going to look like, yeah, we'll really need all the think tanks and minds out there for innovative solutions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all to the panel members. Thank you for everyone who has listened in. I just want to note that Jen has posted a link to APT's activities at COP27, which is just aptassociates.com/COP27. And this is a regular series that we do on a variety of topics, these webinars, and we hope you'll watch our LinkedIn profiles for further activities. Thank you very much, and have a great day. Bye-bye.